How you doing, Troy? How's everything going for you? Or may I call you cyber criminal?
I'm doing good, Chris. Doing good.
Well, I'm excited. We did this. I think we did it about a month ago. We had like a little tidbit about just being able to secure your wealth, and now we're gonna kind of go and dig a little bit more in the weeds. And I'm kind of excited to again learn a bit more from you, Troy, and again probably, as I guess, give more ideas on. A lot of times we are in this and we're looking at how can we build our money, but we don't necessarily take the proper time that we need to actually protect the wealth that we actually build. So I'm really excited about today's event and all the knowledge you're going to bestow on the group here. So how about give us a little bit about your background, Troy?
So a little bit about my background. Obviously, this is not normally how I dress. I'm just there with the theme today. My background is I was working in IT and IT services for probably about the past 15 years, and saw a lot of different methods that people were using for cyber crimes. And as a result, I've had to stay educated on what those are and what they look like for our industry to help make sure that our companies are protected from that.
Yeah, it's cool. Let's just go ahead and get this party started. Give me one quick second. Uh, it is not sharing. Oh, there's a delay here. Give me a quick second, everyone. Let me get this propped up. There is a slight delay. There we go. Okay, so I guess first off, when we're looking at and why we think it's important to have events like this and kind of just educate the people out there is that this is a huge, huge liability. So I quickly pulled some stats earlier today to see exactly how monumental this is. So, and these are some of the stats. So 6 trillion, and this is worldwide, but $6 trillion is what the cost of cybercrime costs. It's the world. I mean, you compare that, $6 trillion would actually be the third largest GDP in the world, right? Third behind the United States GDP and then China GDP. And then cybercrime would literally have the third highest GDP in the entire world, which is crazy. $500 billion a month, $115 billion a week, $16.4 billion a day. This is insane. And it's projected to go up to 10.5 trillion by 2025. So it's it's something that we need to kind of keep on top of mind. Again, obviously, as we're building all of our wealth, we're out there trying to navigate through that journey. We want to make sure we're doing everything we possibly can to protect it from, again, all of the cyber crimes that go on. So a couple of personal stories on my side. So I worked for a large retail organization back in Hawaii, and we had whole departments that would monitor and work and monitor to make sure we were as compliant as we possibly could be and had a safe atmosphere for all the data that we kept. But things still slip through the cracks. Phishing, which we're going to talk about, was one of the scenarios that there's a few, but probably one of the bigger scenarios that I encountered. And the company that we were doing business with at the time, they were actually the one that got hacked. And again, we'll dive into phishing a bit more, but they were able to analyze all of the communication that went between our company and their company and and then return emails back in that exact same email address, to be able to steer us from paying and changing a bank account. So that's exactly how it happened. And it ended up going on for about 2 months, and I think it totaled a little over 500. It was a little over $500,000 over the course of that time. Where again, the company that I was working for was putting the money into a completely different account, a completely fraudulent account. Luckily, we weren't liable because we were not the one that had the attack upon us, but again, it's still out there. We have another scenario. This is about this is fast forwarding to what I do today on the real estate side. There was a scenario, and it didn't happen to me, but it happened to a close friend of mine, where they were a lending company. They did something similar to the debt funds that we do, and the person that actually wired the money is same pretty much situation. It had to do with phishing, but the person that wired the money had the wrong account number. And if you ever wired money before, it tells you, like, you have to check off several boxes to say, do you know this person? Did you verify the account number? And normally you have to put the account number in twice. That still didn't happen. The verification process didn't happen, and 600,000 went to the incorrect account and was completely lost forever. So again, this could happen to anybody, and we want to make sure that you guys are as protected as possible. Troy, anything to add here?
Yeah, definitely. A few years back, there was a incident in the news where it really brought people's attention to the scale of cybercrime, and that was this big ransomware case in the meatpacking industry, where somebody had gone in and encrypted all of the computers that the meatpacking company was using, so they couldn't actually process any of their orders. And it took that meatpacking company down for, I think it was like a week or maybe more. But anyway, it just completely disrupted the world meat market. And turns out that they suspected that the crime was committed by a ransomware as a service company, where you can go out, reach out, hire somebody to do ransomware on some other company, and then you get, that company then gets a cut of whatever they pull from this company, right? So it's crazy that there's people and organizations out there that specialize in this type of thing. And there are some things that you can do to protect yourself from it, and we'll cover those here today as we go dive deeper into this.
Okay. So again, as we're going through this, our goal is to make sure that you guys are informed as possible. There's in the cyber criminal world, it would be almost impossible for us to cover everything, but we wanted to at least cover the top things that you guys can do to protect yourselves, as well as honestly give you guys resources. So you'll see almost every single one of these pages, there's resources to be able to protect yourself more or make your life easier trying to protect yourself. So one of the big things is just, and this is probably where you would start if you didn't start yet, is just unique passwords. And let me just kind of throw in some questions for Troy. Again, he's our resident expert at it, but hey, Troy, could you share some best practices for creating passwords that are both strong, manageable, without compromising security?
Yeah, so probably the easiest way is to use some sort of password manager. Here we list two of the most popular password managers here. And what those allow you to do is that you can have one strong password that you use to access this password manager. And then this password manager can actually generate unique passwords, any length that you want, for all of your other accounts, your bank accounts, your online accounts, or whatever. And that way it ensures that each password is unique. And so that if somebody gets a hold of one of the passwords, they won't have access to the rest of your stuff. So that is probably the best way to go. The second best would be to just use unique passwords personally for each one of your accounts and make sure that they're sufficiently strong. So not, my dog is a cutie 1, right? And then you do for your bank, you do my dog is a cutie 2, right? I think you had touched on before, the most common password was ABC123 or something like that.
Right? Actually, most common password is literally the word password. And then I think the second most is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, so you can see there's an issue out there, right? People treat it as just like, oh my gosh, this is something I have to do in order to get into my account. Let's make it as easy as possible. The drawback of doing that is you're also making it as easy as possible for other people to get in there besides yourself. So those are probably two of the big ones. That I would say the next one would be two-factor authentication, which also gives you, it's essentially like giving you a password and then having a unique end to your password for each one of these accounts. right? Because a two-factor authentication is usually an authentication application. LastPass does have one. Google has one. It's called Google Authenticator. There's a number of them out there, and they all do the same thing, where they will generate a unique number that they'll ask you for. Sometimes they'll send them to your through SMS, that type of thing. I'm sure you've seen it. They send them to your email. Your banks will usually send your email to verify whether it's you or not. And those are usually best practices. You want to make sure you have that name on any of your accounts.
Let me ask you this. So why not why use LastPass as opposed to a sticky notes all over your desk? I mean, why LastPass or why? I mean, not just LastPass in general. And then one thing, just I probably should have recommended. I mean, I mentioned from before is that there's no affiliation at all between all of the resources we're going to give you guys. These resources are, some of them we've never used. There's a few of them we've never used. There's one in here that we've never even heard of. But we wanted to make sure that you guys had, and we did the researches, figure out which one was the best one and why they were the best. But a lot of these we do use. So again, no affiliation. This is just resources for you guys to use to hopefully make your wealth a bit more secure. But going back to my earlier question, so again, why use LastPass as and explain a little bit. Well, if I have one password for LastPass, how is that more secure than me memorizing 50 different complicated passwords on a sticky note?
So here it goes back to, again, is that it's only as secure as the person that's using it, right? So if with LastPass, when you create an account with them, they're going to require that you create a sufficiently complicated password in order to be able to access it. And it'll also require you to set up two-factor authentication on there, so you have that fail-safe method for accessing it. The thing about LastPass, though, is that if you do forget your master password, they can't help you. You end up having to create your entire password database again from scratch, because in order to recover it, if you didn't put in so let me back up a little bit there. You can put in if I die, here's who should get access to this account, and so they can go through and gain access to it. And so you can use that second, that third party in order to be able to get back into the account again if you need to. But the reason for that is that it keeps your password secure, and if something happens to that master password or you lose it, then the rest of your passwords are going to still stay secure. And so you might have to go, if you did lose your account, you might have to go to your bank, and you might have to give them proof that you are who you are, and then reset your password and kind of go through that again. But the benefit of using this instead of, say, like a Word doc on your desktop, a text document on your desktop where all your passwords are in, is that if somebody gains access to your machine or your device, they have access to all of those passwords that you have. And whereas with LastPass, it's an application that you can install on your computer, you can install it on your phone, and so you have access to all your passwords. And it uses, like on my phone, I might use a password manager, and it uses my face as authentication to log into it. So I have a master password there, but it can use biometrics in order to be able to get into it as well. And so that keeps you from having to type it in. But again, one example of making a really strong password that you can remember is look at your desk, look at the things that are in front of you, and from left to right, write down each one of those things. Like it might be stapler, it might be, you might have stapler, monitor, mouse, keyboard, Gumby, all sitting in front of you, right? And if you just type in each of those with a space in between, that becomes a very secure password, because nobody else can see what's in front of you, but it'll help you remember what it is. Or you might use a phrase of a song or something that you loved, or the song that you that you and your wife's or your spouse's the song that you danced to when you got married, something like that, a phrase from out of there. Nobody's going to know that except for you and your wife. And so that's,
I don't think anybody's going to guess Gumby either. I think you're pretty safe with Gumby.
Yeah.
You just showed some of your age there, Troy.
Sorry. I meant Captain Kangaroo. So
Captain, oh, even there we go. Okay, so Troy, you talked a little bit about two-factor authentication, but can you explain the additional security layer that 2FA provides just beyond password? So why apps like Google Authenticator, why are they?
yeah, so oh, it looks like we lost Chris. So in the meantime, I'll tell you why. I'll give you some examples of why two-factor authentication is so important. So with two-factor authentication, the critical piece on two-factor authentication is that you have a unique, usually it's an application on your phone that you'll install that your Google Authenticator or whatever, and you'll have to scan a QR code in order to set that up. And so when you do that, you are creating a unique app to a unique device that is going to generate these numbers for you in order for you to get the a unique code for your password. So if you think about it, say your password is password, well, don't use password, but say it's just password, and you go to put that into a one of your app, your like your bank website or whatever. It's like the two-factor authentication essentially adds that additional random number from that authentication app to the end of your password in order to create a new password, a unique password for every time you log in. And so that's very, very hard to replicate. And it's very difficult for somebody to get a hold of that since it's on your person, you have it, and people can't really get into it. So so LinkedIn user mentioned the biometrics is similar. Let's see. So yes, the drawback of biometrics is that if somebody holds your phone up to your face, they can log into your password manager. They can access your phone. So that is a good point. Is you definitely don't want to have that as your reliant thing. There is, I do understand that there are some cell phone companies, they're in their operating systems, they're setting it up in a way where they're trying to mitigate that for future use. But again, even if you have biometrics, there is a way, a lot of these apps where you can use biometrics, but not only you can use biometrics, but it'll also give you another option instead of just the biometrics in order to, it will require two different codes in order to be able to access it, especially the things that you want to make sure are secure. Never save your passwords in your browser, because if somebody does get a hold of your computer, they can just go in and it'll just automatically fill in the gaps. You're back, Chris.
I have no idea what happened. They just completely kicked me out. I apologize, everybody. I assumed you answered my question.
I did. Good. So we did have some good questions from a few of our users
Awesome.
here. Another one is somebody asked, is email or text code password code verification safer? So there are some arguments to the text code passwords. If there are some SIM card spoofing where they can spoof your number, and then they can gain access through SMS verification codes. That usually that is a little bit difficult, and if you're being specifically targeted by a cyber criminal, there are ways that they can get around a lot of these measures that we're putting in place here. But we want to make it as difficult as possible to for them to be able to gain access to your sensitive accounts and such. As far as whether the code verification, so the code verification, if you use an authentication app, that is safer than having a text code or an email sent to you. Text code's probably the least secure. Email is more secure, especially if you use two-factor authentication on your email. But an authentication app is going to be even more secure than that is, because my LastPass authenticator app it requires biometric authentication just to get into that. So if somebody can't readily gain access to that remotely on your device and be able to find out what that code is.
Well, I think that kind of segues perfect to the next topic, right? The next topic is on phishing, and especially on the email side. So I gave you guys two scenarios that I personally lived through on that happen around phishing. So and I explained they can literally get access to all of your emails and send emails on your behalf on top of that. So the question came up of which one is safer. Again, he answered it, but I mean, phishing, when you're looking at phishing, and we're jumping into the next topic, it's probably the most I guess the cyber criminals or cyber fraudsters out there will use this more than any other tactic out there. So it's something that we feel is pretty important that you got to be aware of and really notice and be able to find those red flags. So Troy, on your side and in your experience, what are some of the red flags in emails or messages that can help us identify phishing attempts that are targeting our investment accounts or just anything, just our computer in general?
Right. So probably the biggest ones you'll see is people that are requesting you to, hey, your account has been compromised. Click on this link and log into your account so that you can reset your password. Right. And so what they're doing there is they'll usually replicate like your bank website or whatever, so it looks legit. It looks right. And if you're not paying attention, you put in your credentials in there, and instantly they have credentials to get into your bank account. That's a pretty common one. Another common one is for them to spoof, to make it look like it's from somebody within your company or somebody that requesting access to, say, bank account information, credit card information, whatever it might be. And what you need to do in order to help protect yourself from that is to look at the header of the email, look to see who it's from. And I've seen them where they've been bankofamerica@gmail.com, right? Obviously that's not correct, but that does happen. Is they'll create these fake email addresses and then try to pass themselves off as legitimate emails, and it may look like it, the name, with if you don't open the email header and look at the details in there, it may just say Bank of America at the top. And so it looks like it's from Bank of America, but in reality, it's not. And so that's probably one of the best ways to find out who it's coming from. If you are ever asked for any of your information, click on this link to reset your password, whatever it might be. If you didn't request a password reset, don't click on the link. Instantly, report it as phishing, delete it, and then report it, especially if you're in a company, report it to your company to let them know that there's been a phishing attempt. And they can take steps to mitigate it, to make sure that there's not any issues more than that. But looking at the header, contacting that person directly, like call up Bank of America using their number from their website and ask them about it. And they'll often ask you to go ahead and forward that email to them so that they can go look into it further and prosecute or find out who it is that are sending out these messages.
I think one additional thing that I would want to throw out there is especially if there's a link on the email and you don't recognize the sender, you don't recognize the email, never ever click on the link. Oh, somebody said never click on the link. Perfect. we got some very intelligent LinkedIn users out there. Yeah, if obviously if you know who where the email is coming from, then you're fine. Going back to what Troy said though, and sometimes it is harder to identify, but really looking at the email address, the sender's email address, I would say probably 80 to 90% of the emails can be flagged looking at that. But again, you just have to take the time to look at the emails, especially if you're going to click on the link. Look at the email, look at the email address to make sure, because they can mimic the email, the look of the email, they can mimic everything. And you just want to make sure that you're clicking it, because once you click on that link, you could be letting viruses in your computer and then they'll have full access, as Troy mentioned before. So don't save your passwords on your computer and don't click on a link if you don't know where it came from.
I was going to say one is probably one of the most common one people fall for is just a quick message like, hey, Troy, this is Chris. Do you have that bank account transfer information that, could you go ahead and send that to me again? I can't find it. Right. And then it looks legit because it's just a quick message from them. And if you respond and you send them that information, also another really good point, never put sensitive information on email. Doesn't matter. You don't know who's receiving it. We've had an instance in one of my companies where somebody, I think it was a CFO or something, sent out an email to the entire distribution list with a secure document attached to the email that had everybody's social security numbers on there, email addresses, like all sorts of information. It was a disaster. So make sure you don't ever put any sensitive information, no account numbers, no personal information on there, social security numbers, credit card numbers. Don't ever include those in any email. Only give it over to the phone to somebody that you called, and you're giving it to the right person.
You did bring up a good point that I don't know if you and I talked about, we didn't think about, is actually sending encrypted emails. Like, what kind of services, and would you recommend it? And is there any services you would recommend? Because there might be times where you still have to send something.
Yeah, there are ways. Yeah, even photos have viruses. That's a good point in there.
That's true.
But yeah, so there are encryption services out there that will require you to open a email with a password or have a specific service. I know Adobe will sometimes, you might get a document that's password protected on there that you have to log in or have that information. But there are applications that can open the document bypassing that security as well. So the best thing to do would be to use, if you need a document signed or you want to share some secure information, is put it on a secure drive somewhere, either on Dropbox, where you can control who accesses it, who has access to it, and then give that person access to it. Only have the one document in there that they can access, and give them that information that way if you absolutely have to share a sensitive document like that. Most banks and stuff will have a secure server for uploading those kind of documents to them and sharing it, like tax documents, that type of thing.
Okay, I think we touched on this a little bit as well, but let's talk a little bit about virtual private networks and what are they? Like, why is it particularly risky to access financial accounts over the public Wi-Fi, and how do VPNs mitigate this risk? So first off, what is a VPN, and the second question, how do we protect ourselves? So how do we mitigate the risk with these VPNs?
Okay, so on a high level, so for example, a VPN stands for virtual private network. And what this VPN software does is it creates a secured connection between you and the endpoint on the other end for whatever you're accessing. So to everybody else, it's encrypted, and so they can't actually see the data being transferred between the two locations. And the reason that this is important is if you're on a public Wi-Fi, say at a coffee shop or something, other people are also going to be on that Wi-Fi, and then there are ways for them to see the traffic that's going between the devices on the network and into the router that's on the network. And so by creating a virtual private network between you and the other end, that people won't be able to see your device, because all your traffic and everything is actually being encrypted and forwarded to another IP address through this VPN service, and then along to the endpoint. And so that it keeps your information encrypted, it keeps your information private, and it keeps it other people from on the same network from being able to access that. And in a corporate network, they do a similar thing through network. It's called the network segmentation, where they can separate out networks from different departments so that you can't see traffic between the different departments as well. And that helps to limit the they call this the surface area of attack for bad actors to be able to access different points of the network.
We do have a few questions that came in, and I'll as we're going through this, I'll just ask the questions. One, sure, I'll save for later because we're going to talk about it. But and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but how safe is sharing info on OneNote? I believe OneNote is Microsoft, but I'm not sure.
Right. So OneNote's Microsoft, basically any service that you can control access to, you're going to have a lot more security on there. OneNote, I believe, is also one of those where, like Google Drive, you can put a document in there and you can share access with a specific email address. And I don't have a lot of experience with OneNote. How about yourself, Chris? No,
I don't, not at all.
I believe it's also set up to where you can actually control access on there. Voice passwords that many institutions are now using in. Oh, yeah, exactly. So somebody asked, how safe is a voice password that many financial institutions are now using with the added use of AI voices? So their AI cybercrime is an entire webinar by itself. There is so much to it right now. But yes, there was actually an instance on the news not long ago where there was several where they got the CFO of the company or the accountant of the company on a Zoom conference where everybody else on the conference was deep fakes of the executive level directors within the company. And they were convincing enough that they were able to convince the accountant to transfer, I think it was like $300 million to another account somewhere. So it's coming, right? Is they can, if they have a voice print, a voice profile of you, they can reproduce it using AI and be able to fake your voice over over a voice authentication method, right? So the key there is, and you'll see this in a lot of movies, right, is they have more than one method for actually accessing very secure things. They might have fingerprints, they might have voice authentication, they might have retinal scanners, they might have and have a password and a number of different things, right, to verify you are who you are. And now none of these are actually fail safe. If somebody really wants to get your information, it is possible for them to get it, short of you taking and putting all of your computers in turning them off, smashing them into little bits, and then burying them in a box in the bottom of the ocean. That's really your safest bet. But what we're trying to do here is just mitigate how much access they have to your information.
Yeah, we're definitely not trying to scare you off of. I mean,
Exactly.
the day and age we're in now, everything is the technology, everything is online. We're just trying to give you again, make you aware of some, well, probably the more common, and like Troy said, AI is an entire webinar all on its own, but it's more of the more common used scams out there and how to better protect yourself. I think it's some of the tools that you can use. So again, we're looking at a lot of this is targeted towards financials, right? Especially on the cyber attacks. Not always, but a large majority of them are targeted towards financials, and for us, it's trying to make sure that we're empowering you to keep your wealth. So one of the things is just honestly monitoring what's going on in your finances. Like it's probably one of the easier things you can do. It's probably one of the things that we probably don't do often enough. I don't know. Let me ask you that, Troy, on your side. How often are you checking your investment accounts or just in accounts in general and making sure the balances match?
So that's true. I do it on a regular basis. I actually have a number of automations set up to notify me when there are instances. For example, credit monitoring is a good one. Whenever Credit Karma or some of these other credit monitoring services pulls your information, they'll usually let you know that there's been a change in your credit, and if it's been something significant, they'll notify you. Whether it's somebody that's pulling your credit, there's been a hit to your credit, there's been a large transfer, that type of thing. That'll notify you. But there are also, like with your bank, I don't know how many of you know this, is that you can go into your bank online portal and set up notifications when your bank account hits certain levels, whether it's below a certain level, it's above a certain level, whether a certain amount of money has been transferred in or out of your accounts. They have a lot of tools there that can notify you whenever that type of thing happens. And I encourage you to make sure that you set those up so that you do have some barriers there, that when something dramatic does happen, like somebody transfers $20,000 out of your account, that the bank is going to notify you, so that you can see, oh my gosh, somebody just transferred a whole bunch of money out of my account. You can call the bank and say, put a freeze on my account. Something just happened. I suspect criminal activity, and they can help you at that point try and figure out what happened and mitigate the risk before your account is completely cleaned out. So that's one way that I do it. I also check my account balances regularly. There used to be this program that was called Mint. It was purchased by Credit Karma, where you could go in and add your accounts and your account information in there so that you could monitor the transactions that are happening in your account. It'd give you some great resources as far as reports and that type of thing, and you could set up notifications there as well, if in case you wanted to be notified when something anomalous hit your accounts. There are also a lot of other type of programs that are out there, probably more paid than free, like Mint was, but they do offer a good way to monitor your accounts and your wealth, to help you understand if there's actually an issue or something that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's worth paying the $10 or $20 a month for you to stay protected. For, again, you're taking all of this effort to build your wealth. I wouldn't cheap out on trying to protect it. I definitely wouldn't.
Well, that's true. And these places like this, a lot of times they'll offer cybersecurity insurance as part of that when you're paying for it and using their service, which is, it's invaluable.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, look, switching over. I guess moving on. So we're looking at your devices. So I think, again, we're in a day and age where everyone is connected somehow to a device, whether it's at home on your desktop or you're walking out. Everybody has some device on them almost 24/7. So what steps are essential for like securing these devices and the investment accounts, especially in terms of like antivirus protection and firewalls?
So I highly recommend, yes, using firewalls and virus scanners and that kind of thing on all your devices. So a lot of people don't realize that you can actually add those to your phone as well. Fortinet, NordLayer, Sophos, they have firewall options that help kind of filter the data that is coming into your phone and going out. They also will watch for anomalies on your devices. Sophos is one of the ones that I use. We've used it at several companies that I've been at, and they're invaluable. You can't watch all of the traffic on your phone all the time, so it's nice to have something that will automatically do that for you.
Maybe explain a little bit for maybe people that don't know, like, explain what a firewall is and how it can keep their devices protected. And obviously it's preventing people from getting into your information ultimately, but maybe talk a little bit more on it and why is it important.
Okay, so here's so a firewall essentially is it can be a device, it can be a software that watches for traffic coming in and out of your computer, and it can control it. For example, if you've ever had a pop-up on your Windows machine where it says this software is trying to access your device, you want to go ahead and let it, allow it access to your network, and you say, hit approve or no. That is acting as a type of firewall. So a lot of software do have a built-in firewall. Some aren't the greatest, some are. Make sure that you research based on what you have. There is a thing that's called a hardware firewall, which is what I typically like to use. Is if you get a device from your internet service providers, say, for example, T-Mobile or somebody, you have a T-Mobile home internet, right? They'll give you a device and it has a firewall built into it. It has Wi-Fi built into it and all of that, right? But T-Mobile has access to that device, and so they can kind of control traffic going through there. If you trust T-Mobile or another company with the safety of your data, then by all means, just go ahead and use what they've got, right? But what I like to do is I'll get a device like that, and then I'll buy a wireless router that I have control of, and I'll plug it into that device. And then I'll hook all my computers up to that wireless router. And so from the outside and from the view of T-Mobile, they'll just see that there's one computer that's connected to it, and that's it. And they won't be able to see anything past that point. And they won't be able to see into my network. They won't be able to access my network because my network is behind that additional router, which acts as a hardware firewall for my network. Now, it will block traffic and that type of thing that's coming in. But there are things that you can do to increase the security on that. It really depends on your need as far as that goes. But I can still access the other computers within my network and talk to them as well. I can also do network segmentation using that router on my own network to be able to filter things further in case we have a guest or somebody that needs to access our either wants to use our Wi-Fi and have access to our network. I can still put them on the guest network, which doesn't give them access to any other devices on that network. So that's essentially what a hardware firewall is, and that will kind of help prevent other people from accessing your devices on that network.
Okay. Well, thanks for that information. I think it just kind of clarifies a bit more, because a lot of times we throw these terminologies around, and I think, I mean, unless you're actively in the IT realm and the cybersecurity realm, you don't necessarily understand and really fully understand all of the components and what is it for. Like, I mean, when I first bought my computer, you had firewalls and you had antiviruses. I didn't know exactly what it was for. I was just told you have to put this on, if not, your computer crashes. And so educating yourself on all of the different aspects of it, I think, just makes it that much more powerful. So again, we sort of touched, I mean, we actually really did touch on this, but maybe talk a little bit about like the encrypted communication, which we did sort of talk about, but maybe just give it another quick overview of why is it important and how can we maybe better protect ourselves just with encryption and just communication in general.
Yeah, so that's a big one. So I mean, we did touch on a little bit about making sure that you call and talk to the people that you want to transfer the information to, and that somebody calling you, for example, if I had somebody call me up and they're saying, "Hi, I'm from the title company. I need your account information so we can transfer the funds over to your account, right? Or from your account to another account." Usually, what I'll do is I'll say, "Thank you very much for calling me. Let me get that information and I'll call you right back." And I don't ask them for the number. I will go and I will look up the title company that I am using, and I will call them, or I will call the number given to me on the card that my title officer gave me, so that I can give them a call back. And I'll call them and I'll ask them if they had called and if they are requesting that information. And if they didn't, and they don't know what I'm talking about, then I know I just barely, I avoided a critical error. And so that's avoiding phishing, that goes kind of in that, but it's also that's secure communication. You're securely communicating your information to the people that you want to communicate it to. And we did touch on community or encrypting sensitive information, instead of sending it over text or sending it over email or sending it over these other services that are not as well encrypted or as secure. By doing those methods, you're able to share that information securely without having it compromised, right? And so those are kind of the and then the last thing we just touched on just a second ago, whereas using a VPN to make sure that any of your digital communications are encrypted as well, helps you to avoid compromising your information. So secured communication covers anything where you're communicating with somebody else. You want to make sure that it is secure, and that you're not giving out information that shouldn't be given out to those who don't need it.
I would say also, and Troy touched on this, but just to sort of reiterate it, just because we do a lot of it, so wire transfers, we do a ton of wire transfers, incoming and outgoing. the one recommendation I would give is before you hit the send button or you go down to the bank, call the person that you know that you're sending the money to. Like, just give them a call. It's not going to take you literally a minute. Call them and say, I need to verify your account number, because again, and I went through that scenario, like literally 600,000 from a friend of mine who ended up wiring the money to the wrong person and literally lost $600,000. So again, and it would have been fixed with a 30 to 45-second phone call just to validate that the account number is correct. So I would say anytime you're wiring to anybody, call that person. Again, don't use their number. Just because they emailed it to you doesn't matter. Don't use it. Make sure you get on the phone, call, and verify that account number. And whatever other information you need, routing numbers are the biggest one, is just verifying the account number.
Yeah, don't trust the one that you wrote down or that somebody else wrote down. You definitely don't spend $600,000 to anybody unless it's to me. Then go ahead and send that.
You got to put your uniform back on there.
Yeah, where's my hoodie?
No, software updates, really. Maybe just give a general brief overview of the software updates. Why is it important? And because when you and I were talking earlier, you kind of articulated a little bit more about how people can get into your system and kind of identify if you didn't do a software update, and then open up yourself for more risk.
Yes. So these are very, very important, right? Is that the reason that you have software updates that are going out is because the software companies have identified critical vulnerabilities within their software, and that's the reason they send out updates, whether it's a bug, whether it's a vulnerability that people have to be able to kind of get access to your computer, and now they have full control of your system. So Windows, iOS, your Android phone, your Mac, right? All of these are constantly sending out updates, and you'll get another update from Windows, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm in the middle of a meeting, we got to update again right now, thing, right? But they're very, very important. They're critical, and if you miss one, what usually happens is the people that have identified the bug will give the software company a certain amount of time to fix the bug before they go public with it. And then they'll publish the bug publicly. So now not only do people know what the bug is, they now have instructions on how to access that bug because the people that found it publish it publicly. And so it's important to keep your software up to date so that those holes are constantly plugged, and any new ones that are being identified are being plugged. Now, if you wait a very long time before you update your software, not only are you adding a vulnerability to your system, but when you do go to update it, it may jump so far forward to the new update that it didn't get a lot of the files and drivers that it needs in order to be able to run some of the programs that you're currently running. And Chris, I think you said you'd run into this before, where you update your software and now one of your programs don't work because it's no longer compatible with that version of Windows or whatever, right? And so you end up having to go and try and roll back to an earlier version, reopening those vulnerabilities again, which is not something that you ever want to do. So make sure that you keep your software updated, that you are Chrome is notorious for it. Browsers are notorious for it. You want to make sure that those are updated. And with Chrome in particular, you can just go to the About page in Chrome and just have a check for updates, and it will check to make sure that you have the latest updates. And it'll ask you to restart your browser. And I know you don't want to close those 500,000 tabs that you have open, but there are some really good extensions out there to kind of help save your tabs. Which ones are open. I personally like Session Buddy, and another one I like is what's it called? The Great Suspender, which will suspend tabs in the background that you're not using after a certain amount of time to free up resources so that your computer's not bogged down. So anyway, so that's the importance of regular software updates. In a company, you'll also end up needing to update not only the software but your hardware, like your your switches, your firewalls, all that kind of stuff will require regular updates as well. I don't know if you're trying to talk, Chris, but you're muted.
No, I'm talking to my son. I gotta apologize. I had extra noise in my background. But yeah, that's great information, and yes, it definitely does happen. We actually did have, so for the slide before when we were talking about communication, we actually had another good recommendation that came in from a LinkedIn user, and I definitely do it if it's a new account that I've never sent to before. But even if it's an account that I've sent to, I always still am going to call. So again, we wire to title companies all the time, just the nature of our business with lending. We're always doing title, and we do the same. A lot of times we use the same title company, but every time I get a wire, I'm going to call and verify the number, even if it was the same number that I used in the past. But one of the comments that came in is just maybe send a small wire. So send $1, verify, have the other side verify that the money hit their account, and then now you're safe, right? It's definitely better to lose $1 than to lose $600,000. So great recommendation there. And then one more question just came in: how to verify a software update is legit and not virus being sent?
So usually if you do want to do a software update, you'll want to do it through the software itself, right? It's usually they have a communication with the software provider and a validation system where it can validate whether or not it's actually a legitimate update. So not to say that there hasn't been instances where I think it was a CC Cleaner at one point. Somebody had snuck a virus into the software update, and so when it got updated, that virus went out to all of the different CC cleaners. So that's on the company itself to make sure that stuff doesn't happen. But as a user, there's no way you can know until it's been announced and that you actually do know. If you want to wait a few days, like say Windows wants to do an update, and you want to wait maybe a week, 5 days or whatever, you can do that. And usually within that time period, there's been enough people that have picked up the new software patch that there will be either another patch that comes out right away to fix an issue that they've identified, or there'll be a report of somebody actually getting hit with a virus. Now, if you do have a good virus scanner on your system, it will flag the update and prevent the update from actually installing if it does find that there's a virus in that software being updated. Because it will scan every single file that moves through its system during the update. And so it does slow your computer down a little bit, but it's better to have your computer slowed down a little bit than to not have a virus scanner that won't pick up that type of thing. Don't turn your virus scanner off. Never turn your virus scanner off. If somebody says, "Oh, yeah, turn off your virus scanner to see if that fixes a problem," well, you know what? If you have to turn your virus scanner off, it fixed the problem for them, but maybe not for you.
Yeah, open up yourself to that many more problems. I think this is a good segue as well. I think the next two slides segue well into that question. But for this one, you and I had some discussions on this earlier. So I guess what strategies would you recommend for backing up? Because again, if somebody can get into your computer, they can not only steal your information, but again, going back to my statement before, how I assumed it is like you lose your computer, lose all your data. And I mean, a lot of times, especially for entrepreneurs out there that are listening, right? There's a lot of data, a lot of work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that you put into that work, and it's all stored on your computer. Okay, and with our digital age, everything's there. So, what kind of recommendations do you have for backing up critical financial documents, just to protect against like ultimate headache of losing everything?
Yes. So backups are critical. It's critical to have it. If anything happens to your computer, like my wife, she threw her phone into the river the other day, and so we had to get her a new phone. Now she lost all of her contacts and everything, right? We lost all of her information back to when her last backup happened. And so it's critical that you keep regular backups. If you do a weekly backup, and now here, let me touch on before I touch on frequency, let me tell you about a couple of different options. So you always want to have at least 2 backups of your data. usually that'll be one locally. You have like a hard drive that you can plug into your computer, and you can back up your entire hard drive to it. Back up your phone to your computer, and then the other one is either you take and give another copy of your backup to a family member somewhere else, or back it up in the cloud. Backing it up in the cloud, it gets difficult. Say when you're editing video and photos and that type of thing, and you have a terabyte of photos and videos, it's going to take forever to restore that backup, right? That's why you want to have a local backup, is because it's going to be a lot faster to get back online. But again, if you're backing it up locally, you want to use something like Synology or QNAP, where it's actually a device you can plug into your network and back up your computers and things to that device on a regular basis, and it will handle all the automations. Otherwise, if you're just plugging a hard drive into it, the failure is you if you didn't back it up, right? And for me, I'd rather have something that has a lot better memory than I do to do that kind of thing. And so I'll usually set up a Synology or a QNAP that has redundant hard drives in it in case if a hard drive goes bad in that device. There's still another backup within that backup. When you're backing up to the cloud, like Google Drive or using some other backup service out there, there's a zillion different backup services you can use to back up your entire machine into the cloud. There are also services specifically for businesses where you can take and they'll send you a hard drive where you can back up large amounts of data. They'll send it to you, you back everything up to it, and you send it back to them, and they'll plug it into their system and get you up and get your backup up and running. And then from there on, any new files that come on will just add to that. So there are ways to back up large amounts of data quickly without having to stream it over your network. So backup devices is a cloud and locally, either on a network, a NAS is what they call that, network attached storage, or a hard drive. And then setting up a frequency of how often you need to back it up at least once a week, I would recommend, if not sooner. If your company can't handle losing an entire week of data, then back it up daily. Just try to understand what the need is for your company and make sure that you follow those guidelines, and that the people that are working for you also follow those guidelines, so that you're not losing. So talking about people still, I forgot to mention that before. Your weakest link is the people that work for you. Okay, so you can control yourself, you can control what you send, but if you don't have policies and procedures in place and education in place for the people that work for you, they could definitely compromise your systems. Yes. Yeah. Somebody was asking, please clarify, cloud backups are encrypted. So yes, use a cloud backup service that is encrypted. Google, they do encrypt your data. You have pretty much any cloud backup service that is well known will encrypt all of your data. So if something happens, and you have they call it a key to your data, and so the data looks like it's not encrypted to you, but to everybody else, it just looks like gook on their devices, which is similar to what happens when you run foul of a what's called ransomware, where what they'll do is they'll encrypt your entire hard drive, and then you'll get a pop-up that says you are being targeted by ransomware. Pay this amount of money, call this number, and pay this amount of money in cryptocurrency in order to unlock it. Right? Again, that's kind of what we had spoken about earlier for the ransomware. But if you have good backups, which the meat company didn't, they ended up losing a lot of money in paying the ransom and setting a record for the amount of ransom that was paid for for this type of service, and they still didn't get the key, right? Which was ridiculous. But well, it's not ridiculous they didn't get the key. That was obvious, right? Why did they send them the money in the first place? But there was another company that you didn't hear as much about that got hit with with a cyber attack, where they encrypted all of their devices, tried to use ransomware on them. But what they did is they wiped off all of their systems, and they restored a backup copy, and they lost maybe a week of data, and they were back up and running. they had all their clients on there still. They had to go back to maybe, find a week of new clients that were added, but they were back up and running the same day. And so it's invaluable to have good backups of your information, and good clean backups as well. So, but yes, backups are in the cloud are encrypted.
That's some gold information, and love the gold nuggets that were being shared here. So when we're looking at, again, there's and we talked about like AI, and there's like we have one last slide that just covers like AI. We can't go into everything. There's so much there. But the one thing that you guys can look at, especially if you guys have your own businesses, because again, and it kind of ties back into that question earlier that where we were talking about as far as like lawsuits and if we're getting it. Well, actually, it wasn't about lawsuits, but shoots, my mind just went blank. What were exactly it had to do with oh my, I'm trying to look through the questions again, but it had to do with someone sending or someone getting, like, who does the liability fall on? And again, it gets into a whole new different thing. But again, most larger companies will have some kind of cyber insurance coverage. And then again, if something happened to you, but it was the fault of another third party, again, like the story I had, the phishing attack was on a third party that we dealt with. We did still send the money to the wrong person, but it wasn't our liability because it fell on the other companies not having the right procedures and protocol and SOPs in place. But again, especially if you have a business, cyber insurance is going to be, except for your data loss, right? Cyber insurance is going to be the catch-all for everything. Now, again, we're not insurance experts at all, but all we want, and we're no affiliation with AIG. I don't even know who Chubb is. We just Googled it. I don't think Troy knows who Chubb is. These are the top two in cyber insurance carriers in the world. So we wanted to be able to have that out there. And all of your insurance not all, but most insurance carriers out there will have some kind of cyber insurance coverage. And the type of coverage you get is going to be unique to just you and the business that you do. But especially if you're a business, if you're an entrepreneur, if you do any type of work online, and if you're handling large sums of money, you want to make sure that you have your cyber insurance kind of locked in on. And then you have to look at what are the things that you're going to look for, like the coverage scope, like what are you covering? Like, we literally went through all types of different things that could happen in, again, ransomware, phishing. We have a page with this AI, smart malware. I mean, there's just a ton of stuff out there. And you want to be able to make sure your coverage. So you're going to look at coverage scope, coverage limits, what kind of exclusions do they have in their policy? What is the claim process like? And I think one of the bigger ones, and not all of them will offer this, but what kind of risk mitigating services do they offer? Because Troy talked about it earlier, right? You're going to have to keep educating yourself. These are things that are always going to change, and try to educate yourself as much as possible to make sure you're protecting yourself, you're protecting your wealth. And if you own a company, you're protecting the wealth of your clients. And you always want to make sure that that's always top of mind. And again, having cyber insurance is just going to be one of those catch-alls. Anything to add, Troy?
Yeah, it's going to be a kind of a thing in the future here where everybody's going to need to have it. And
yeah, with $6 trillion in estimated worldwide loss, it is not going to be a cheap insurance policy. But again, if you're a company dealing with large sums of money, dealing with a lot of vulnerability in online activity, it's still something that's paramount to have. The cost of the coverage is not going to outweigh the potential loss. So again, insurance, right, is just the shifting of risk and the shifting of liability. So instead of you as a person or a company holding that liability, now you're going to shift that liability over to your insurance carrier. Okay. I heard there's been a lot of people talking about this, so this is our last slide. We're wrapping it up. Again, this is just some things to be on the lookout for. So go ahead and kind of take it away on your side, Troy, and just small tidbits of what you know about each one of these.
Yeah, so deepfakes, we touched on this a little bit earlier about how there was a company that they were able to convince the the accountant to transfer $300 million out of the company just using deepfakes on a Zoom meeting. So that means that they had a number of different deepfakes running of different people from the company, and they had enough information that they could actually use them convincingly. So that AI cyber-driven crime is definitely going to be something to watch out for the future. They're able to hack faster than hackers can. They're more adaptable as far as being able to change their attack vectors based on what the kind of methods are being used against them. So that makes things even more difficult. Against smart malware, same type of thing. Social manipulation, where they can go out and they can discredit people. They can do whatever they need to in order to pose as that person, right, and to discredit them. So it's coming. It's just going to get worse, but there are going to be AI tools that emerge to combat that as well, to where it's going to be more of computers fighting computers than we are fighting computers, to try and mitigate some of this stuff coming up in the future. There's also new networking technologies that deal with quantum computers and quantum networking and that kind of thing, where the computer power is going to get to the point where their standard encryption methods are no longer going to be effective. And so they are coming out with new standards and new ways to, with the new technologies that are coming out, to mitigate those new threats as well. We did have a question here.
It's not a question, it's a comment. It's a good comment. So it's sort of what we were talking about before on the insurance side. So if you're collecting personal, and it depends, like there's different industries, there's you even got laws, right? Depending on what industry, and you got HIPAA. But if you're collecting personal information, cyber insurance is another thing that you want to look at, just because, and again, it's gonna, like I said before, you just want to make sure the coverage that you're getting is applicable to the business that you're in. So again, even protecting, because you could, again, we see it all the time where there's leaks in your social security number, especially leaks in your. I probably get a letter at least once every 4 months of somebody that got the personal information leaked out. And again, that is a lawsuit that could potentially happen, and you want to make sure that you mitigate it against that. How can we get a comment? Okay. We'll definitely answer that on the last slide. The second to the last slide. So we went through a bunch of resources here. Like Troy just spewed knowledge of, and we did some research trying to make sure that you guys had the best tools that are applicable for now. Just again, going back to what Troy just said, it's applicable for right now. And it's not something, especially with the technology, it's always advancing. There's always smarter criminals. As Troy mentioned when we first got into this meeting, there's literally companies built around hacking and just not the cybersecurity side, literally the opposite of it, right? The people that they actually help you hack into other people's accounts, and it's crazy. The world is crazy, but again, as I said earlier, literally like the third largest GDP. So it's literally a business out there. And scan this QR code. It should give you access to all of the resources that we covered.
Yeah, so I don't know if we had mentioned this before, if it's on the next slide. Probably one of the best ways to protect yourself against these cyber threats is to stay educated on them. Look what's happening on, in the news. Look, read information about that you can pertaining to your industry about what kind of threats are out there and which ones are becoming more common. There's no excuse for ignorance in this day and age as far as cybersecurity. So make sure that you guys keep up to date. Keep well informed. We'll try to put together a list of resources where you can find that information, and to stay up to date on current cyber threats and issues that are going on in the industry.
Yeah, good point. We'll try to make sure that we update the list as we get more. Again, we got resident Troy expert here. that helps us stay protected. We want to be able to reciprocate that and have you guys stay as protected as possible. So we'll probably be updating, at least maybe we'll probably try to target once a quarter. We'll go back through, make sure our list is up to date, and if there's anything new, we'll add it to that resource list. But you guys use that QR code again. If you guys need it again, use the QR code, download the resource list. And I really appreciate you jumping on, Troy. It's throwing a ton of knowledge on us, even myself included. I know we had some fun talks prior to this webinar, but appreciate everybody else out there in LinkedIn, YouTube, if you're on Facebook, jumping on, or in our Google channel. Appreciate you guys spending the time, spending Thursday night with us at Rise Investments. Again, just helping to grow your wealth as well as protect your wealth. Again, it's important to us. The number one thing we can do is making sure that you're protected and you're growing your wealth. So thanks a lot, Troy. Really appreciate you. Sorry for dropping off. Not even sure what happened. I don't know if you noticed, but our names were changed. You were not Troy anymore. You were Pound70F. So we might have been hacked on the platform that we're on now. It's who knows. But it was definitely fun getting together with you tonight, and I appreciate everybody out there in LinkedIn land and YouTube jumping on.
Sounds great. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night, everyone.